My name is Ava. I am 28 years old. The night my world fell apart started with a family invitation I never really wanted to accept. When I walked into my parents' house that Sunday afternoon, the living room was crowded with rented folding chairs and small tables crammed into every corner. There were 35 relatives there, all dressed up in their Sunday best, as if they were attending a formal service at the local Methodist church. As soon as I stepped through the door, the room went silent. Everyone stopped talking and just stared. It didn't feel like a homecoming. It felt like I had walked onto the wrong stage during a play I hadn't rehearsed for. Not a single person moved to give me a hug. No one told me it was good to see me. A few people gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod before turning back to their own groups, acting like I was just some stranger who had wandered in by mistake. I knew right then that I should have turned around and walked back to my car. Instead, I found the only empty chair at the very end of the long table and sat down. Casserole dishes were being passed around the room, but no one offered me a serving. No one moved their glass to make a little extra space for me. I just sat there in the middle of the noise, listening to them toast to new promotions, engagements, and babies. It was a list of every life milestone that I was apparently not invited to share in. Suddenly, my mother stood up. She walked over to the gallery wall where all the family portraits were hung in perfect straight rows. She reached up and grabbed the frames that held my pictures and ripped them off the wall, one after another. The sound of the glass shattering against the hardwood floor made the entire room go quiet. She threw my photos into a large trash can that had been placed right next to the table. Then, she announced to the entire room that I was a parasite who had spent years draining the family's resources. My father didn't do anything to stop her. He just sat there, looking me right in the eye, and told me I needed to pay back every single dollar they had ever spent raising me. He told me I was nothing but a failed investment. My sister, Brittany, pushed her chair back with a loud scrape against the floor, stood up and pointed toward the front door. She looked like a bouncer at a club kicking out a troublemaker. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice to defend myself. I just grabbed my purse, walked out of the house that had just officially deleted me, and called an Uber to take me back to my apartment. They thought that was the end of the story. They had no idea that I had been quietly watching what they were doing with my name and my credit for months. That dinner was just the final spark I needed to blow up their perfect reputation with a legal storm they never saw coming. If you want to know how a daughter they threw away turned a night of embarrassment into the moment her parents finally had to pay for their crimes, stay with me. When I got back to my place that night, my hands were shaking, but it wasn't because of what they said. It was because they had finally confirmed what I suspected. In their minds, I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a bill, a liability, a debt they thought they owned. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to my laptop on the kitchen table. I didn't call my best friend to cry. I didn't post a rant on Facebook. I opened a new document and typed one sentence at the top in big, bold letters to keep myself on track. This is not about feelings. This is about what they did with my identity. As the blue light of the screen filled the dark kitchen, I started to go over everything I knew about my family's finances. My mother is Susan. She is a senior loan officer at a big credit union just outside of Denver. She's the type of person who mentions her financial expertise in every conversation, especially if she thinks you are about to make a choice without asking her first. My father is Jim. He co-founded a successful plumbing and HVAC company. He is incredibly proud of the fact that he built it from nothing, and he is just as proud of reminding me exactly how much it cost to raise me. My older sister, Brittany, is a high-level school administrator. She is the kind of person whose perfect smile is on every school brochure, and her Instagram is full of those fake, inspirational quotes. We were the typical Colorado family. We had the matching Christmas sweaters and the professional family photos taken at the park every fall. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. When I told them I wanted to major in UX design instead of going into nursing or accounting, Susan told me it was just a creative hobby. She kept asking when I was going to get a real career. Jim would make jokes at Thanksgiving about me being the artistic one, but the way he said it made it clear he meant I was the one they couldn't count on. Every choice I made that didn't fit their plan was added to an invisible tab of debt I supposedly owed them. When I started college, Susan made me open a joint bank account with her. She said it was to help me manage my money so I wouldn't ruin my credit before I even graduated. I was 19 and busy with classes and a part-time job, so I just signed whatever she put in front of me. She set up all the online banking, saved the passwords, and told me not to change anything. She told me she was the only one who would be able to fix the mess if I forgot a payment. Years later, even after I moved to my own place in the city and started my career, she still had my Social Security number memorized. She still insisted that my tax forms and important mail be sent to their house because she claimed it was more secure. I always thought she was just being a helicopter parent. I never dreamed she was doing something illegal until the letters started coming. A few months before that dinner, I got a letter from a bank I had never used. It was a welcome letter for a personal loan application. I figured it was just junk mail and threw it away. A week later, another envelope arrived about a new line of credit. Around the same time, the credit monitoring app on my phone sent me an alert that my score had dropped significantly. It made no sense. I was paying off my one credit card every month and making my student loan payments on time. There was no reason for my score to tank like that. I took a screenshot of it and meant to look into it. But work got crazy with a big project and I let it slide. That night, after being kicked out of the family, I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. I went to the official government website and requested my credit reports from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. As the files downloaded, I forced myself to take slow breaths. I needed my anger to be cold and focused so I wouldn't make a mistake. When I finally opened the files, it was like someone had turned on a bright light in a dark room. There were accounts I didn't recognize, opened in towns I had never even visited. All of them were tied to my name but used my parents' home address. There were small personal loans, a credit card for a department store, and a line of credit that had been maxed out and then rolled into a bigger loan. The dates lined up perfectly with the years I was busy building my career and trusting them to handle my mail. The contact number on most of the accounts was Susan's cell phone. I sat there staring at the screen, waiting for some other explanation to pop into my head. But there wasn't one. I made a new folder on my computer and started moving everything into it. The credit reports, the alerts from my phone, and photos I had taken of those weird envelopes. I got a notepad and started writing down the account numbers by hand, circling every single one that used my parents' address instead of my own. Then I went to the Federal Trade Commission website and followed the steps to report identity theft. I filled out the forms with every detail, explaining how someone with access to my personal info and my old joint account had been opening credit lines without me knowing. I wrote it all out as if I were preparing a case for a judge. After that, I put fraud alerts on all my files and did a full credit freeze. I locked everything down so that no one could open a new account in my name without going through a mountain of security checks. Once that was done, I opened my design software. If there is one thing I am good at, it is taking a mess of information and making it easy to understand. I designed a simple infographic. No fancy stuff, just clean text and clear stats explaining how identity theft often starts with family members. I didn't use any names. I just focused on the red flags and the patterns. At the bottom, I put a small note that said, "This happened to me." I saved the file, exported the image, and looked at what I had made. My parents thought they were safe because they were operating in the shadows. I was about to turn on every light in the house. The next morning, my phone was blowing up. My lock screen was just a long list of missed calls and texts. My dad started at 5 in the morning, calling over and over like he could force me to talk to him. Then Brittany started. She called 20 times before 7 a.m. and sent a bunch of texts saying I had embarrassed the family and that I needed to apologize to our parents. By 10 a.m., Susan joined in, but she was acting differently. She wasn't screaming like she was at dinner. She sent long, typed-out paragraphs about how we needed to talk calmly and begged me to just pick up the phone once. I stood in my kitchen in an old t-shirt and watched the numbers go up. Every time the phone buzzed, I felt a spike of adrenaline, but I didn't open any of the messages. I just took screenshots of the missed calls to document their harassment and saved them to my evidence folder. It was a clear pattern. They only reached out when they needed to control me or when they realized they were losing their grip. I made some coffee, sat back down at my laptop, and looked at the infographic from the night before. I uploaded it to an anonymous account on a big social media site, specifically in a group for people dealing with financial problems and credit issues. I titled the post, "My family stole my identity for years. Here is what I wish I had known sooner." I wrote a short professional caption about how a relative had used my data, and then I hit post. I did the same thing on my professional networking page, but I framed it as a lesson on financial security. I made sure to remove any specific details that could lead back to my parents' names. I wasn't trying to start a public fight. I was applying pressure where it hurt. For a while, nothing happened. I answered some work emails and worked on a design project, trying to pretend my life wasn't a disaster. Then the notifications started changing. People began commenting on the posts, asking for my advice and sharing their own stories about parents or siblings opening accounts in their names. It was a relief to know I wasn't alone, but it was also horrifying to see how common this was. One private message stood out. The username was generic, but the message was very specific. The person thanked me for the post and said the layout was very clear. Then they added a line that made my heart stop. "Some of this sounds exactly like what my sister has been doing to our family." A second later, another message came from the same person. "Ava, is that you?" I froze. Not many people knew I did UX design and freelance graphics. Even fewer would recognize my specific style from one image. I stared at the screen for a minute before asking who it was. The reply came back instantly. "It is Linda." It was my mom's older sister, the aunt who was an accountant. She was the one who always seemed to be on the edges of family photos, looking like she didn't quite belong. She asked if we could talk somewhere private, away from the family group chat where Susan usually gave out her orders. We got on a private call. I went out on my balcony and listened to the city noise below. Linda's voice sounded incredibly tired. She told me she saw my post on the professional site first and then saw it again on the forum, and she knew it had to be me. She explained that a few years ago, Susan had offered to help her fix some debt after her freelance business had a bad year. Linda had signed a bunch of papers because Susan promised it was just a simple way to combine her credit card payments. It was easier to let the family money expert handle it. But lately, Linda had been getting letters about a loan she didn't remember taking out. When she asked Susan about it, my mom told her it was just a clerical error and told her to throw the letters in the trash. As Linda talked, I started typing as fast as I could. I recorded every detail, the names of the banks, the dates, the amounts, and the exact things Susan said to keep her quiet. At one point, Linda stopped and asked in a quiet voice, "Ava, did she do this to you too?" I told her everything. I told her about the credit reports, the fake accounts, and how my name was still tied to their house years after I moved out. I could hear Linda take a sharp breath. It was the sound of someone finally realizing their suspicions were right. She admitted she never really trusted how Susan forced herself into everyone's business, but she had always told herself it was just Susan being bossy, not a criminal. "I thought I owed her for helping me," Linda said. "Now I realize I have been paying for something I never agreed to." We agreed that she would scan every piece of mail she had and send it to me. When we hung up, I had a whole new set of evidence. This wasn't just about me. This was a lifestyle. My phone buzzed again. My dad, then my mom, then a cousin. I ignored all of them. For years, they had told everyone I was the one taking from them. Now I was seeing how many people they had actually used to keep up their image of being successful and generous. I silenced my phone, opened my files, and started building a timeline that didn't care about family ties or hurt feelings. It was a timeline of signatures and dollars. 2 days later, Brittany texted me like nothing had happened. Her first message said, "Can we get coffee? We need to talk like adults." She was still trying to act like I was the child. I almost ignored it, but then she sent another one. "It is about Mom and the money, please." That second text worked. It made me curious. We met at a coffee shop near my office, one of those places with a lot of plants and expensive lattes. Brittany was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She tried to smile when she saw me, but it didn't work. We sat there for a moment, two sisters who didn't know how to talk to each other without a script. Finally, she said she was sorry for how the dinner went. She didn't apologize for what she did. She just said the situation got out of hand. She blamed the economy and the stress our parents were under. I let her talk until she ran out of excuses. Then I pulled a folder out of my bag and slid it across the table. It had copies of my credit reports with all the fake accounts highlighted in bright yellow. I told her I was filing an identity theft claim and that the banks and investigators would be calling soon. Brittany's face turned white when she saw our parents' address on all those documents. She tried to say Susan was just trying to help and that Mom knew how to get better interest rates. I asked her when trust started to include forging a signature. She didn't have an answer. I pointed to a loan from 3 years ago and a credit line that had been moved around, all using my old joint account info. Then I showed her the email from Aunt Linda where Susan told her to ignore a legal notice. Brittany read it twice. She looked like she was finally seeing the truth. When I asked if Susan had ever managed her money, Brittany hesitated. That hesitation was her answer. She finally admitted that there were a few times she let Mom handle things because she was too busy with her new job. A small debt consolidation here, a co-sign there. Brittany had signed papers where Susan pointed without reading them because it was easier. As she spoke, I took notes. I asked for bank names, dates, and amounts. A lot of them matched the lenders on Linda's list and mine. It was a system. Susan would show up when someone was stressed, offer to fix it, get them to sign papers they didn't understand, and then take enough money to pay for whatever she and Jim wanted, like a new truck or a kitchen upgrade. When I mentioned our Grandma Rose, Brittany looked even more upset. She said Mom had handled everything when Rose sold her house to move into assisted living. Susan had gone to every meeting and handled all the checks. She told everyone that most of the money from the house sale had gone to taxes and fees. Brittany said it never felt right, but Susan always got mad if anyone asked for details. I typed as fast as I could, putting the pieces together. Year 1. I start college and open the account. Year 2. Linda's business struggles and Susan steps in. Year 3. Grandma Rose sells her house. 4. Jim's company suddenly gets a brand new van and a fancy new office. On paper, it was just numbers. In reality, it was a history of manipulation and guilt. When I told Brittany I had already contacted the FTC, her eyes went wide. When I told her that Susan's own credit union would have to investigate once they saw the fraud, she stopped defending them. She sat there in silence for a while. Then she asked what I was going to do next. I told her I was talking to a lawyer. I wasn't doing it for fun. I was doing it to protect myself before the whole house of cards fell on me. If that meant the whole family found out, then that was just how it had to be. Brittany promised to send me every email and text she had about Mom and money, especially anything about Grandma Rose. She said she didn't want Mom to go to jail, but she was tired of feeling like something was wrong all the time. As we left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't know with a photo of my dad standing next to his shiny new plumbing van, holding a beer and smiling. The caption said, "Funny how he got that upgrade right after Rose sold her house, isn't it?" It was from my Uncle Steve, my dad's brother. He was the one who always made jokes about Jim's sudden wealth. I showed the photo to Brittany and watched the last bit of denial leave her face. On the bus ride home, I emailed a consumer rights lawyer. I sent a summary of my timeline and the documents I had. I told him that what started as a bad family dinner had turned into a trail of fraud and stolen money that led straight to my parents. They thought they were cutting me out of their lives that night. What they really did was give me the reason I needed to follow the money all the way back to their front door. A week after I met with Brittany, my mother showed up at my office like she was just there for a surprise lunch. My receptionist sent me a message saying my mother was in the lobby and that she seemed intense. I walked out there and saw Susan sitting there in her expensive blazer, hair perfect, holding a leather folder like she was about to close a big deal. She gave me a big fake smile, the one she uses for people at church. She asked if we could talk. I told her we could talk right there in the lobby in front of the security cameras. She wasn't happy, but she sat down. She started with a fake apology, saying the dinner had gotten too emotional and she didn't mean everything she said. She kept talking about how hard things were for her and Jim. I let her talk until she finally got to the point. She said she saw my post online about identity theft and that people were talking. She wanted to know what I was telling people about them. That was all she cared about, her reputation. I told her I had posted an educational graphic and that I hadn't used any names. But I also told her I had filed a formal report and frozen my credit. I told her the banks would be looking into what she did with my social security number. The color drained from her face. Her fake smile disappeared. She hissed at me, asking if I knew what I was doing to her career and the family. I told her I knew exactly what she had been doing to my credit and to Aunt Linda's for years. I showed her a summary of the evidence I had. Susan stared at it, her jaw tight. She tried to tell me I didn't understand how banking worked and that she was just helping everyone build credit. She said no one had a problem until I started making a scene. I reminded her that helping people requires their permission, not forging their names and telling them to hide letters from debt collectors. She leaned in and whispered that we were family, and that family doesn't sue each other. She told me to take down the post and tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. I looked her in the eye and said no. I wasn't hiding her secrets anymore. She stood up so fast her folder hit the table. She told me I was making a huge mistake and that I shouldn't come crying to her when it all blew up. She walked out, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. My boss, Mike, had seen the whole thing and asked if I was okay. He offered to help me if she ever came back. That support felt better than anything my family had ever given me. Over the next few months, the truth started to come out in waves. Linda sent me all her documents. My lawyer sent everything to the compliance department at the credit union where Susan worked. They were already investigating because of my initial report. A state investigator called me for an interview. It wasn't like a movie. It was just a calm voice on the phone asking me to verify dates and account numbers. Every time I said I hadn't authorized a transaction, I felt a little more free. I started a website to help other people dealing with financial abuse. I used my own story as a case study without using names. I watched the traffic grow as people shared it. Some of the visitors were strangers, but I think some were relatives. A cousin I hadn't seen in years emailed me to say my story sounded familiar and asked how to check her own credit. I told her exactly what to do. My parents went from calling me all the time to being completely silent. Then Jim started texting about how outsiders were ruining the family. He didn't realize that the only thing ruining the family was the truth. It took a while for the full consequences to hit. It was a slow burn. The first big thing was a letter from Susan's credit union saying they were doing a full audit of her files. Then the state regulatory board asked to use my documents for their own investigation. I signed everything. I wanted it all out in the open. I wasn't there for the rest of it, but Linda told me about her interview with the compliance officers. She had to tell them about every favor Susan had done for her. They showed her papers with signatures that looked like hers but weren't. She told them she never got the money from those loans. Grandma Rose's story was even worse. Her lawyer had to do a deposition at her assisted living center. Rose cried when she saw how much money Susan had taken from the sale of her home. She had trusted her daughter, and Susan had used that trust to fund Jim's business and their lifestyle. Jim tried one last time to get me to drop it, calling me to say I was destroying everything. I told him I wasn't destroying anything. I was just showing everyone what they had already done. The credit union fired Susan for gross violations of policy. They reported her to the state board, and her license was suspended. All those years of her acting like a money expert ended with her being kicked out of her office. Then came the lawsuit. Linda and Grandma Rose sued my parents for fraud. My name was all over the legal papers. My parents tried to claim it was just a family misunderstanding, but the paper trail said otherwise. They didn't have the money to pay the settlement, so they had to sell the big house. The house with the wall of photos was gone. They sold the plumbing van. Jim had to sell part of his company to a partner who actually watched the books. Word got around the family fast. Some people were mad at me at first, but they got quiet when they started checking their own accounts. A few more months passed, and the version of my family that everyone saw on social media was gone. My parents moved into a small rental apartment on the other side of town. Susan had to get a part-time job in retail because no one in finance would hire her. Jim hated having to answer to a business partner. For the first time, they were the ones dealing with the consequences. Brittany moved to a different school district to get away from the gossip. She and I aren't best friends, but we talk now without the lies. Linda and I are close now. She sends me photos of her dog, and Grandma Rose is doing better, managing her own small budget for the first time in years. Rose sent me a letter, thanking me for standing up for myself. I keep that letter in my desk. My life isn't perfect, but my credit is clean. The fake accounts are gone. I got a promotion at work because I kept showing up and doing my job despite the drama. My website helps people every day. I still do design work on the side, but now I use it to make legal info easier for regular people to understand. I'm using the skills Susan hated to do the opposite of what she wanted. I wish I could say we all had a big dinner and fixed everything. But that's not what happened. My parents are still bitter. They still think I'm the one who started the fire. But I know better. I didn't start the fire. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it burning. I don't give out my passwords or my trust just because someone is related to me anymore. Love doesn't mean being someone else's safety net for their bad choices. If you think something is wrong with your money, check it. The people who love you will understand. The ones who don't will call it betrayal. But sometimes the only way to save yourself is to speak up. Fimda Historia.